Hi everybody, welcome to Diversity of Urban Art podcast. My name is Brandon Price. We're here at International Hot Glass at Artagon Marketplace. Today we're going to give you a little demonstration of glass blowing. This art has been around for thousands of years. We've just done it in a little more modern setting. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a glass bowl for you. Myself and my partner David Sandage are going to be working on this piece. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we need to do is head right over here and grab a blowpipe. Now this is a stainless steel pipe, and you can see it's got a hole in the end and one in the other, so I can put air right into this. Now what we'll do is just heat the end up a little bit in this piece of equipment called a glory hole or a reheat furnace. Now this is about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly the same temperature as an active volcano. And we stand about 3 feet away from it while we're working with the glass. So what we're going to do is just make sure that the end of this stainless steel pipe is nice and hot, because the molten glass doesn't want to stick to cold metal. So we have to preheat this pipe so that the glass will actually stick to it. So the next thing we're going to do is get some of that glass I've been talking about out of our furnace. Now this is a 300-pound furnace. That means it's holding 300 pounds of molten glass inside of it, and it's all heated by electricity. So there's about 6 elements inside of there, and they're putting enough heat to melt this silica sand, soda ash, and lime mix that we use to create glass. So what we're doing now is a process called air marvering. I'm just letting the glass kind of fall off the end of the pipe. Not all the way off, because you see if I stop moving, it does want to fall all the way off. So the next thing we're going to do is come over to this small metal table known as a marver. Now they call it a marver because that's the old Latin word for marble, and that's what they used to make these tables out of. Now we can use steel. It's a little more readily available, and it works just as well to cool and help shape the glass. So now that we've got that nice shape on it, what we're going to do is start a bubble. So I'll trap a little bit of air right into the pipe. And as the heat gets to that air is going to expand, and it doesn't have anywhere to go except for into that glass. So that's how we get the beginnings of our bowl. Now I'm just going to marver that back into the original shape, only this time it's hollow. And then we're going to wait just a second and let this cool down before we put a little bit more molten glass on the outside. And while we do that, I'll give you a quick rundown of some of the tools we're going to be using today. This first tool is called the jacks. All right, they're basically 2 knife blades on a handle. I can use them to shape the glass in several different ways. We can put little constriction points. I can also shape the glass on the outside like so. Now the next tool are the tweezers. All right, and these work just like your tweezers at home. We use them to grab the glass, pull little points out, things like that. Then we've got a couple different kinds of scissors or shears. These are diamond shears. You can see they make a little diamond shape. And then we've got straight shears if you want to cut a straight line. A little metal paddle, which is essentially a handheld marver. And this is the Soffietta. We'll get into this a little bit later. That's a puffer. That's so I could put air into a piece once we've turned it around, once it's no longer on a blowpipe. So now let's get a little more glass, and we'll start adding color to this piece. Now we're going to make a golden ruby bowl today. So what I'm going to do is get a little more clear on the outside of that first bubble by taking a gather. Okay, so I just dip the pipe right into that molten glass and spin. It comes out just like honey. And then we'll cool the pipe down a little bit. I've just got a small trough of water I roll the pipe in, and then we'll go into this. Now this is just powdered glass. All right, it's the same basic formula, silica sand, soda ash, and lime, but we've added in metal oxides. And in this particular instance, we've added in gold, and that gold will give us a nice ruby color. So we'll start to melt that powder in, and then we're just going to add a couple more layers of it to make sure that it stays nice and rich as we go through the process, because this bubble is going to blow out a lot further than where we're at right now. So this little device that I keep setting the pipe on is known as a yoke. Just like what they put on oxen, and that's because it takes a lot of the weight off of me when I go back up there to reheat. I can rest it right on its shoulders and then melt all that color in. So now we'll just take another second, get the temperatures nice and even here, and we're going to head back to the bench. I'm going to have Dave go ahead and start that wrap. And now we're going to use a tool known as a block. Now this is a piece of fruit wood soaked in water, usually cherry. We use fruit wood because it has a little higher sugar content, and what that does is kind of caramelize, if you will, the inside of it. So we get this nice carbon layer built up in there. Now what's happening when I roll this glass through that block is something known as the Leidenfrost effect. And if you ever made pancakes at home, you know what I'm talking about. You flick water on the skillet, the water kind of dances around. That's because the water never actually touches the skillet. When it gets close, the heat vaporizes that water, turns it into steam. So that water just dances around on a little steam barrier, and we're doing the same thing with the block. I dip it in water, I come up, I shape the glass. That ambient heat creates steam, and I actually shape this glass with just a little barrier of steam. Now Dave's gonna go ahead and shape up this wrap, we call it. He gets a little bit of molten glass on the end of a solid rod, known as a punty. So you can't put any air into that one, but you can go in and get a little bit of glass on the end. So Dave went in, did that, and then rolled it through another color. In this case, it was iris blue, mixed with something known as aventurine. So it's a sparkly, shiny blue, and what we're gonna do is take that and stretch it right around this piece. So we're gonna get this kind of organic pattern. And that'll just stick right to the surface of my first bubble. Now I want to melt that in a little bit. We're going to need to make this nice and smooth before I can go back in and get more glass on the outside. Otherwise, we'll trap little air bubbles. Now sometimes we put air bubbles in there for a certain effect, or even to prove to you that it's been handmade. But in this particular instance, we're going to try to smooth it out and not catch any of those bubbles. So by putting it back into the 2,300 degree reheat furnace here, we'll be able to melt all that wrap right into the surface. We'll turn this back into one kind of homogeneous mass of glass. And then we can start putting more clear on the outside and blow up what will become our bowl. Good, now you can see most of that's already smoothed in at this point. So we're just gonna kind of help it along, make sure it's all nice and even by putting it back in the block. And just like so, we're back to that shape. That nice egg shape the block gives us. Now at this point, I'm going to use one of the really high-tech tools we keep around the studio. It's a piece of wet newspaper. All right, so it's about 5 sheets of pick your favorite newspaper. We fold it into a little square, dip it into water. And that's going to use the same principle as the blocks. Wet wood. It's just a little more malleable so I can control the shape that we're actually going to get. Now I'm not sure if you can see the sparkles on the camera or not, but it should be pretty. So again, It's a hurry up and wait process. We get to where we need to be, then we're gonna let it cool down again, and then we can go back in and start adding more glass on top. All right. So now we've got enough glass to actually make our bowl. So what I'm going to do is just cool the pipe one more time, bring it back to the bench, and we're going to start working on the bottom half of the piece. All right, the top half of the piece will get shaped once we take it off the blowpipe. So we'll get that nice shape. Now what I need to do is take this over to our larger marver, and I'm going to actually cool the bottom a little bit so we can control where that air is going to flow. So by cooling the bottom, what I'm going to do is ensure that when I put air into this, we'll be able to puff up the top a little bit. So just like so, and back into the heat. Now at this point, I'm going to have David help me out again. He's going to put a little bit of air into the end of the blowpipe so that I could be on one end shaping the glass, and at the same time we'll be filling this bubble with more air. Now it doesn't take much pressure to actually get this to puff up. All right, on, Dave. And off. So now, the next thing we need to do is start our constriction point, or jack line. So those jacks that I showed you earlier, the two knife blades on a handle, we're going to use to make a little valley right up by the blowpipe. And the reason we do that is so that we can remove this piece from the blowpipe, because eventually I'm going to have to cool it down. And when I do that, I'm going to have to put it in this box over here known as an annealer. And it's not big enough to fit with the pipe on there, so we're going to have to break it off the rod. All right, so another heat. We call this a drop heat, because I'm actually going to stretch the piece, put my jack line in, and puff it up with a little bit of air, kind of all at the same time. Come over here, use a little bit of gravity now. I'm going to start that constriction point. And I'll take a little bit of air from Dave. Blow. Off. All right, so now let's just reinstill that little line there. Good, and we're gonna blow it up just one more time and then get a nice flat base so we got somewhere to sit this piece. All right, on. A little hard. Sweet. All right, I'll take a door. We're gonna heat up just the bottom of this now. Left-hand side if you can. You can just leave that one open. We'll go back, I'll paddle, you paddle, I paper. All right, so we're controlling where the heat goes by the depth that I actually put the piece into the furnace. Yeah, I need you to paddle. Yeah. Yeah. Off. All right, so now you can see we've got a little flat spot down here. So that's where the piece is going to stand. We've now shaped the bottom half of the piece. All right, right now the glass is about 1,500 degrees, so the next step's punty. So the glass is about 1,500 degrees. It's getting to the state that it's rigid. It doesn't want to move anymore. But I need to maintain a temperature above 1,000 degrees. Now it's going to be a little bit colder up at the top because the bottom is the first thing that's going into the heat, last thing that's coming out. So what I'm going to do while Dave gets our punty ready is just heat the neck up again. Now we're starting to see some of those sparkles come out. The color's really coming back to life. What we're going to do in this next step is take this solid rod, another punty. David's going to bring that around and we're going to attach it to the bottom of the piece. Now once we do that, we're going to have to fracture this glass. That's good, Dave. So we're going to have to fracture this glass and break it off, and to do that, we're going to use a drop of water. Holy cannoli, that's a big one. All right, so we're gonna get a drop of water there, drop of water there. All I need to do is bring it up, give it a tap, pops right off. All right, so this one's all done. We got a little bit of extra glass there. That's just part of the process. We'll set that down, and now we could focus on the top half of the piece. Now Dave's gonna focus the heat on the top half for a moment, and we're gonna let the heat really soak into that. Once we do, I'm going to come back to the bench. We're going to open it up with the jacks a little, and then we're going to use that soffietta, or the puffer, that I was telling you about earlier. So now we're on a solid rod. So this is the only way to get air into that piece. And what we're going to do is take this cone, put it right in the opening, and actually blow into the piece. So I'll be able to puff up that little shoulder that we created, and that's going to give us a nice opening on the vessel once we finally spin it open. So it takes just a second to get the heat to flow back into that piece. It was the coldest part of the piece just a second ago. Now we're kind of reversing that trend. So the bottom of the piece is going to be the coldest, and this top portion that we're reheating is going to be the hottest part. We're going to start changing the shape of that. How are we looking, Dave? All right, so you can see we got it nice and hot now. Dave's got plenty of heat built up in there. So I'm going to cool the top of the piece with the back of my jacks. I'm just going to slightly open that top. And then we're going to take the soffietta or the puffer, put that right inside. And you can see how it just puffs it right up. So one more time inside with the jacks, make sure we've got that opening going just how we want. And then we're going to head back up. And this is the real showstopper of the piece, because now the rest of the shaping is going to be done with heat, gravity, and a little bit of centrifugal force. So I'm going to get in here and again just focus the heat on the top half of the piece. Now when I do that, you can open it and step, you're good. So as the heat starts to build up in the top of the piece, the act of me spinning it is going to want to pull everything out to the outside. So I'm going to control the speed I spin until I have the heat just right. And then we'll spin a little bit faster and we'll actually be able to flare this piece out. Now the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to go flat like a plate. Then we're going to use that little bit of gravity. We're going to hold this piece down, and that's where we're going to get these nice ripples around the edge. So I'm just going to give it a little more heat here, and then we're going to pull it right out. And there you can see we open up and turn into a platter just like so. And then using a little bit of gravity, we're going to get little ripples all around the edge of the piece. Now I can control how wide those go or how narrow they go by how much I spin and the speed I do it. So we're going to get a little more heat on the bottom because again I'm going to have to shock this piece. So we're going to head over to the annealer now. Paul, we're going to head to the annealer. All right. So, one more time we have to shock this piece to get it off of this rod. And again, that just takes a drop of water. So what I'm going to do is just get that drop of water right there at the connection point between the puntee and the bowl itself. And then we're going to flip it upside down, give it a little tap, and it pops right off. Now to make sure there's no sharp edges on here, what I'm going to use is a small torch, and I'm just going to smooth in that little break. So that'll make sure there's no sharp edges. Now Dave has on some Kevlar gloves. These are the same kind that firemen use. So what we're going to do is go right inside this annealer. This is a big oven. We're going to head all the way to the top right-hand side. We're going to slide this piece in there. It's about 920 degrees inside that box. All right. Now that's the temperature that glass won't move, but it also won't break. So all day I can load pieces into that oven, and then slowly overnight I'll press play and this will cool down for about 12 hours. That'll slowly cool the glass through the strain points at 750 degrees and 250 degrees, bring it all the way to room temperature. And then we get to come back tomorrow to see how it looks. So thanks so much for joining us here at Diversity Urban Art at International Hot Glass here in Artegon Marketplace, and we'll see you next time.